Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're glad to see you all. Welcome to our workshop. Thanks for turning on your video, Cindy. It's nice to see a face. Hi, everyone. Hi there. Hi, folks. I see a couple names I know. Hi, welcome. Okay. So we can begin, I think. I am so happy to see all these folks here. I'm Anna Corwin. I am one of the co-chairs of the Women's Spirituality program here at CIIS. And I'm so happy to welcome you all to the first in this series. We, in the Women's Spirituality program, we run a PhD and we run a master's. Our PhD is in women's spirituality, and our master. Well, anyways, we run a PhD and master's. I'm going to put this into the chat so that y'all can, if you're curious, if you don't already know us, because I see some new faces. And today, one of the things that we are doing in our program is expanding some of our curricular and non-curricular offerings. We're really excited to be bringing a lot of this work that we do in academic spaces into outside of academic spaces. And we have developed a series of workshops, and this is the first one on spiritual entrepreneurship that are looking to share this kind of work and training and skill building with in the fields of spiritual entrepreneurship with folks in our program and then also beyond. I'm putting the link. Oh, maybe you already did that. Thank you, V. V corrected my thing. Thank you, V. I'm putting some links in there, and V is correcting them because she has some better links there. So this is the first in our workshop series. This is called Building Spirituality into Your Clinical Practice, a workshop for licensed professionals. The next two will be building a solid foundation for a thriving spiritual business. And then the final one will be called Establishing the Marketing and Business Tools for a Thriving Spiritual Business. And I am so thrilled to have Dr. Mae Casanova here, who is a licensed clinical psychologist with over 15 years of experience in the mental health field. She's the owner of Grow Good Psychology, a liberatory trauma specialty therapy practice in San Diego, California. She is also finishing up her master's with us in women, gender, spirituality, and social justice in our master's program here. And her PsyD is from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. I am so thrilled to have her here, and I will stop talking and turn it over to Mae. Thank you so much, Mae.
Thank you, Dr. Corwin. And thank you, V, for being here on an administrative end, kind of helping to make sure we're staying in line and keeping things running. Welcome. I'm really excited to be here as well. I'm excited to share a little bit, not only about what I've learned in the master's program here at CIIS, but also the application and the accessibility of the information to clinical practices. And I mean, it's in the title. It says, for licensed professionals, but I was messaging with some of my classmates earlier, and I was like, it's really like how spirituality, when you're a human, like trying to work within the systems that we're having to work in. So it's geared towards, right, in more clinical practice. But I mean, anyone who's in the service industry or dealing with other humans on a day-to-day basis in the wellness field or anything like that, hopefully will be able to get some nuggets. So before I get started in the more formal aspect of the presentation, I was thinking we could take some time to kind of ground into our space. So getting in a comfy spot, somewhere where you feel like you can Maybe go inside. We'll do a little grounding. Hmm. Hmm. To initiate our time together, I invite you to go inward, sitting comfortably for your body, feeling the support of whatever's under your legs or the support of whatever's behind your back, settling into your body and into this space together. If you can, maybe close your eyes gently, maybe place your hands over your heart or rest them in your lap. And just start taking some deep, intentional inhales and exhales. This is an invitation to soften the boundaries of the mind, to allow wisdom beyond words to enter, and to prepare the heart to expand with curiosity and compassion. I gently challenge you to let go of any expectations. There's nothing to force, nothing to resist, simply open, like the petals of a flower greeting the sun. Taking a slow breath in through your nose, exhaling through your mouth, feeling your body settle, feeling the tension melt off. Now, gently shifting your awareness downwards, feeling the weight of your body connecting to the earth or whatever solid foundation you're on. Visualize or imagine roots gently extending from your spine, flowing down to the earth, deeper and deeper, anchoring you in wisdom older than time. With every breath, your body becomes more grounded, more present, and more open to receiving. Couple deep breaths here. Now I invite you to bring your awareness to the space right behind your heart, the center of your being. Imagine a soft green emerald light glowing there. It's warm, it's gentle, it's tender. This light is the wisdom of those who came before you, your ancestors, healers, the spirits of the land that we currently inhabit, having gratitude and honoring those who were here long before us, and the wisdom that they share. This soft cream emerald light is the essence of healing itself, a knowing that transcends books and theories, a wisdom that speaks through intuition, ritual, and sacred presence. Breathe in and let this green light expand. As we breathe out, feel any resistance or judgment, let go. You get to just be, receiving what feels right for you and letting go of what doesn't. Holding on to that glow, that light, I invite you to bring it with you back to this moment as you start to settle into our sacred space together. Gently opening your eyes, some light movement, bringing yourself back into our space. Mm. All right. I am going to share my screen and go through a little bit more of a formal, but still informal portion of the presentation.
As Mae is bringing up her slides there, thank you so much, Mae, for the grounding. We are a lovely small group here. I know that I think when we came in, the videos were off. If y'all want to put your videos on, it's lovely always to see folks in community. And of course, if you want to stay off, that's wonderful also.
Great. All right. Well, if this slide makes sense to you, you're in the right spot. There's Entrepreneurship Series, Building Spirituality into Your Clinical Practice, a workshop. So some of our offerings today. We did some grounding into our space. I'll give a more informal, less academic introduction and also my testimony to utilizing spirituality in clinical practice for myself. We'll have some time for self-reflection just to kind of see where we're at mind-wise, heart-wise. And then we will talk about decentering individualism in sessions. We'll talk about exploring ritual and ceremony in sessions, exploring other ways of knowing, some time for questions. There'll be a break in there, and then closing our sacred space together. All right. Me, licensed clinical psychologist, small business owner, dog mom. He looks much cuter than he is. He's a little gremlin, but he's my little gremlin. A spiritual being, recovering people pleaser, perfectionist, disruptor, feminist killjoy, activist, bookworm, extrovertly trained introvert, very Capricorn January Capricorn. And also my positionality as a white cis woman, exploring my queerness, able-bodied presenting, making sure that that's brought into the space as well. Spirituality for me was something that I had always associated with more of kind of the dominant hierarchical secular religions, and didn't necessarily have the best experience with that growing up. So it was something that I kind of abandoned as something that just wasn't for me, because I had this kind of more rigid way of thinking that it needed to exist. And upon exploring lots of different ways that spirituality can look like, and that I get to make it mine, and that everyone gets to make it their own. And that's the beauty of it. That is the interconnected thread of it all. Beginning to explore that more on my own, really realizing how much it opened for me, how much it helped me feel interconnected to people, places, and things, and really helped me to feel safe and supported in a way that I hadn't been able to feel before. So as one does when they have beautiful awakenings, right? We want to share, not in a, share the good news, knocking on doors with, with Bibles or anything like that, but just testing the waters, shifting my language a bit, being a little softer, a little bit more tender, a little less clinical. And the response has been really beautiful. And so I think that there is a way that we can incorporate spiritual practices, and that a lot of us might already be incorporating spiritual practices into clinical work or wellness work or, primary medical model work. And there's an aspect of this that is a bit of a disruption to the status quo, to the Western medical model way of thinking. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But I do see inviting spirituality into the clinical space as a tool of disruption, for the systems that keep us, that want to keep us small and keep us in boxes. So there's definitely a disruptor activist aspect to that as well. So I want us to take just maybe 3 to 5 minutes or so and just kind of reflect initially What is your narrative around whether or not spirituality belongs in traditional therapy, health, and wellness spaces? Narrative is a very therapist word to use, but what comes up when you think of that? Where does your brain go? What are some of the automatic thoughts that come up? And so I invite you to again take maybe 3 to 5 minutes or so to just kind of journal a bit, even just ponder a bit, even just sit in meditation for a bit with it. Not to be shared, just for you to kind of get a gauge for where you're starting from. A little bit more time here to finish up. All right. Mm. Okay. So I think the beautiful thing about spirituality is that there are a lot of really magical definitions, and yet we get to create our own definition of what that means and looks like to us. So, what spirituality means to me, there's three parts to it. Do a lot of things in threes, but believing in the interconnectedness of every living thing, believing that there is divine energy within and around us, and believing that we will never have to do anything alone. The first section that we'll talk about is challenging, individualism as a spiritual practice. So Western healing models prioritize and encourage individualism. They see healing as a private experience based on self-improvement, self-help, and personal responsibility. Self-awareness and self-reflection are important, but this limited model doesn't allow a lot of space for more relational and collective ways of healing. Seeing healing as collective is a spiritual act as it challenges the colonial and capitalistic narratives that really keep us isolated and feeling like we have to do it all alone. In sessions that I have with clients, there's so much pressure, right, of needing to wear all of the hats, to be all of the things, to do all of the things. The systems that we live in, giving these pressures of more, of bigger, faster, stronger, grind culture, and really rigid, defined, right, kind of gender roles or gender in general in that way. And so the Western healing model is, you got these symptoms. What's wrong with you? Let's fix those symptoms so we can get you back out into this system that's, doing so much harm to you in general, and just kind of becomes this, this hamster wheel of experiencing symptoms that are very valid based on the systems that we live in, patching up so you can get back out there into that same system again. A spiritual way of looking at healing says there's nothing wrong with you. There's a lot wrong with the system. Healing is possible, and you don't have to do it alone. So one way we can reclaim our collective spirit is through the idea of communal healing that focuses on relationship, reciprocity, and shared experience. And communal healing or relationship can just be you and your client in the room, right? A collective or relational, can happen individually and can happen just in a dyad as well. So communal healing within the therapy space or within the wellness space focuses on the relationship between the practitioner and the client, focuses on these ideas of reciprocity, that energy is being shared and given and reciprocated, intention, attention is being reciprocated in these spaces, and that there's space for shared experience. We'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about, kind of the more clinical model of not sharing personal experiences, or therapists not being allowed to be humans in the therapy spaces and kind of having to be this blank slate of nothingness. But shared experiences is a huge part of building a spiritual practice. The African tradition, right, of Ubuntu, I am because we are. Buddhism has this interbeing, this interconnectedness, and this interdependence. Typo there on the bottom, but we experience our humanity in relationship with other, in relationship to, in comparative relationship, and in relationship with. Another way we can reclaim our collective spirit in the clinical space is by identifying and calling out collective trauma. I mean, we're in it now. We're currently sitting in a space of collective trauma, just as generations have done before us. Many traumas are communal and intergenerational. Colonialism, racism, displacement, and violence do not just harm individuals, They impact entire communities, they impact families, they impact family systems. We can name this in the room and acknowledge the historical harm that is showing up in the present day. This can happen when maybe we're doing a trauma timeline or getting a trauma history. We can ask the individual to go back beyond just themselves, right? Just their own trauma. What about family trauma? What about things that your mom experienced or things that your grandmother or your great grandmother experienced? And taking inventory of that as well. Really honing in on this science of epigenetics, that environmental and emotional and intellectual harm that happened to previous generations becomes, has a stamp on the DNA that then gets passed down onto newer generations. So not only, right, is the trauma passed down through story or through experience or through, right, how your parents treat you or treat relationship or treat parenting or see the world, that then influences how you see the world based on what their experience was. But there's also this genetic component to it. So identifying, naming, being curious about the trauma, not only from the individual that we're seeing or that's right in front of us, but their ancestry and their family line. This idea of reciprocity is another way that we can reclaim our collective spirit. Healing is not just about self-improvement, collective goals that we can be a part of in the healing space, and my healing as an offering to you. So this really challenges, right, the individualistic aspect of it. I need to get better. I need to, manage these symptoms. I need to work on my emotional regulation. I need to work on my health, or I need to work on my fitness, or I need to write this I. And a lot of the times from providers, that's because we're getting a you from the provider in that way. You seem to have a hard time, right, maintaining relationships. You seem to have a hard time prioritizing, right, your health or your wellness over others. So it makes sense. I mean, the model was meant to be, right, an individual kind of responsibility for shifting and changing. But I think really diving into the why and what some of these goals might be for therapy that aren't around, right, bettering oneself and becoming more of, like, who do you want to be in the world? How do you want to show up in your community? How do you want to show up in relationship to other? How has someone shown you, right, unconditional love, support, acceptance, right? And how can we reciprocate that? Collective goals or community goals or family goals, friendship goals, right? This is how I want to show up in the world. This is how I want to show up in my interpersonal relationships because they're really meaningful and valuable to me. And my healing, working on myself in relationship, impacts the collective, right? Yes, taking care of my side of the street, my little corner, right? And if we're all taking care of our little corner, then corners all around the world, right, become bigger and bigger, and we're able to make impact. But if we're just focusing with those blinders on just our corner and we're not seeing, right, what's going on in the other corners around us, then we're missing out on a huge opportunity for connection. Going back to that, interconnected or interdependent, right? My healing affects your healing, affects the collective healing, and so on and so forth. So how we as providers can be collective beings in the room. Acknowledge loved ones, ancestors, and past selves in the room together. We might be sitting with one person and it's this dyad of back and forth, but there's a lot of other energies and a lot of other beings in the room, and acknowledging that. Even suggesting it. Who do you want to bring in with you today? In some of the trauma modalities like EMDR, right, we do resourcing. We find a wise figure. We find a fierce, strong protector figure. Bringing those into the room. Who do you need here with you today to support you as we work through whatever we might be working through? Past selves, past versions of the client that we're working with. Younger selves. Inner child, right? Inner child work is highlighted a lot. I usually say the little you. Is the little you in the room right now? Is this the little you that's reacting to this? And what does she need? Highlight ancestral or familial resiliency, right? As much as we move through the trauma and the suffering and the hurt and the pain and the impact that all of that has, there's also space to focus on resiliency. How did your family overcome that? How did you overcome that? I'll do a little plug for pleasure here because I think that suffering has become the primary human experience, and that was not always the case. Pleasure and joy, just as much so, can be a primary human experience. And so this would be a good time in highlighting resiliency, right? And also highlighting the things that generationally, right, brought joy and pleasure to our clients' lives. We can slow down to resist the harmful systems, right? Capitalism, grind culture wants us to get in there, identify all the possible problems and go through the list and fix each one of them. So by the time the client, is out of session, right, we've achieved everything that we came in to achieve, and there's been significant change in these areas. Slowing down. Our shared time with people in healing spaces is about quality over quantity. How deep can you go into something? How much can you pull apart the intertwined, the weaving, right, of our humanity, of the individual's humanity that you're working with? And just slow down. There is a power dynamic in the room, right? Me as the clinical psychologist with this license and millions of dollars of student loans, somehow I'm the expert, right, in the room in that way. And sometimes that's really harmful, but sometimes it can also be really helpful because we can set the pace. We can say, hey, I know you have a lot going on. It's super overwhelming. But can we take it one thing at a time and really kind of get down to the root and the source rather than band-aiding, right, or fixing kind of all of this symptomology? So we can also impact the cadence and the speed of session. Resist the urge to help them be more functional in the harmful system. This part is so hard. because we see so much of the suffering and we want to relieve the suffering, right? Client comes in, I can't do all the things. I'm overwhelmed with momming and my professional career and still trying to make time for friends and time for self-care and me time. And right, I can't do it all, right? The facade of doing and having it all. And so, initially it's like, okay, well, let's do a checklist. Let's do a schedule planner. Let's plan out your time differently so that you can be in all of these spaces at once and you can check off all of these boxes, right? There's this urge to fix or help reduce the suffering, but it's not getting to the root of it. It's not getting to well, what would it look like if we didn't have to be all of these things all the time? And that's when we work on more of the systemic influence there. That grind culture and patriarchy and capitalism and all of those things are in. I mean, when we talk about acknowledging loved ones, ancestors, and past selves in the room, we better acknowledge that those systems are in the room as well. Finding ways to connect through shared experience. Client-centered self-disclosure. A lot of my work at my practice and probably my favorite, I don't know, my favorite part. I really love working with my clients, but I love mentoring and being a clinical supervisor for green or, not yet licensed associate therapists. Because I get to get in there kind of in the beginning, right? And they're fresh, fresh out of school and therapy, at least academia, can be very like fear-based, right? Like don't be intimate with your clients, don't hug, no physical touch, no self-disclosure, you're not allowed to have an opinion, right? All of these to prevent harm. And there's definitely I mean, they're there for a reason, right? They've been exploited and taken advantage of and things like that. But they come in kind of with this fear of, oh, I'm not allowed to be like me or human in the room, right? I have to be therapeutic and I have to utilize these systems and these modalities and I have to follow kind of the plan in that way. So being able to facilitate discrepancy around when having a shared experience with a client can actually be really helpful in sharing in that collective humanity and in sharing in the collective struggle. And this doesn't look like, right, a client sharing a trauma and then the therapist kind of spending the next 10 minutes talking about, right, their trauma that's very similar and how they overcame it or anything like that. It's just taking a moment, pausing, putting our hand on our heart and saying, I feel that and understand that more than you could possibly know. Thank you so much for sharing that. And our client might have more questions and we can self-disclose, right? But it being very client-centered. Am I disclosing this because I have something to share or I like being able to connect in this way, right, with other people? So I'm doing it in the therapy room also. Is it coming from more of an ego-driven place? Or is it because I feel like in this moment, my client really needs to know that they're not alone in this experience? There's nobody else in this room to be able to give it to them besides me. So having very client-centered opportunities for self-disclosure. We'll talk a little bit more at the end with some of the difficulties maybe in implementing some of this stuff, right? If you have a supervisor or a boss or a policy at the place that you're working, right, where this isn't allowed, and we have to, do some under under wraps kind of resistance in that way. Um, but yeah, finding ways to connect through shared experiences that are focused on how is this going to benefit the client. Okay. I'm going to shift. After this section, we will take a little bit of a break, and then come back and I can answer any kind of initial questions on the first two sections. So intuitive and other ways of knowing. Okay. So we have our clinical ways of knowing. They're rational, they're intellectual, they're evidence-based, double-blind, 0.05 accuracy. They're facts from experts. These are the things that we're taught. And these are the ways that we're taught to show up in clinical, therapeutic, medical spaces. We're supposed to be the objective, rational one in the room. We're supposed to be the smartest one, the expert in the room. We're supposed to have and utilize all of these modalities that have been evidence-based and have all of this research and this very, this very rigid curriculum of how to implement them. And if we're not the biggest expert in the room, then we're quoting from the other experts that developed these models. Some other ways of knowing: embodied wisdom, spiritual experiences, lived experiences, intergenerational story work. So embodied wisdom is that I just know this to be true. I can't rationalize it. I can't give you all the reasons why. I just know this to be true for me. I feel it in my bones. Spiritual experiences, messages that we've received, synchronistic things that have happened to us, visions, dreams. Our lived experience. Our lived experience is fact. I was in this situation and this is what happened. That's my truth, my fact, and doesn't necessarily need to be justified or. And these are all the other people who also had similar experiences in this same experience, so my experience must be accurate and valid. And then a lot of Native and Indigenous cultures using intergenerational story work, where things aren't written down in books or studied in research labs or anything like that. They're stories that are passed down intergenerationally, the oral storytelling, the oral way of communicating ways of knowing and communicating knowledge and communicating intelligence and communicating experience, right, in that way. Stories from our ancestors, stories from our mimis or our yayas or our grandparents. And this is a very simplified, I don't even know if that's a word, but a very simple kind of way to maybe differentiate between a more intuitive response and a trauma response. One of my favorite therapy memes is, trust my gut. That bitch can't even handle gluten, right? Or can't even handle dairy, or can't even, right? We're given this message of go with your gut, trust your gut. What's your gut telling you? And a lot of the time our gut might be an initial activated fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. It might not be an intuitive, right? Sometimes our initial is because we're triggered and because we're into that, what's going to keep me the most safe right now, and doesn't allow a lot of time to assess. So again, 3 and very simple ways that we can differentiate is that our trauma response is urgent. We have to do something now. This is overwhelming. It's too much. I have to do something now. It's scarce. I have to do something now. I don't have enough time. I'm not going to be in this situation again. It's now or never. I won't have the resources. And it's very activated physiologically in our body, right? Being able to notice, right? My heart is racing. I'm perspiring. My hands are sweating. My head feels really tight. I feel blood rushing, right? These are activating responses and ways that we know our body is being activated. Intuitive responses are flexible. There isn't this sense of urgency. There's time, right, to kind of think it through. It's not something that has to be done right this second. It's abundant. I will have the resources when I need to have them to be able to make the decision that I need to make. There will be people in my life to help me through that. There will be, finances to help me through that. It's an abundant. There's a faith in the abundance there. And the feeling is a bit more settling. Not without any activation, but even within the activation, there's still this like, okay, body, I know we're getting activated because this feels really scary, but it also feels really settling. It also feels really grounding and also feels really right for us. Mm, okay. How we can be an intuitive being in the room as the practitioner, as the provider. Be open to phenomenon. Be open to something that doesn't make any logical sense. Be open to dreaming, be open to exploring, be open to accepting something as someone's truth, even if you don't understand it. I mean, I put phenomenon here, but I also like magic, being open to magic in the room, the magic of someone's experiences. Awareness of our body's response in session. In a lot of somatic experiencing work, there is kind of a reflection there that the therapist can do with the client as far as, as you're telling this story about you not being able to speak up for yourself in this particular instance, I'm feeling a lot of tension in my jaw. Are you feeling tension in your jaw? What if we just stopped and did a little body scan to maybe see if there's a space that you're feeling tension? So being aware of how our body's reacting to the energy, to the content in the room. And quite honestly, really taking care of ourselves in that moment, whether that means, right, kind of our own kind of self touch here as we feel ourselves get activated because of what a client might be sharing. I do a lot of like hand, kind of like finger kind of rubbing, right? Like self-soothing. Some deep breaths, closing our eyes for a moment. If we're feeling activated, then there's a high chance that our clients are also feeling activated. So taking a moment to slow down. Maybe this would be a good time to pause and check in. How is this feeling for you in your body? And again, this isn't just in the therapy space, right? I mean, if we're providing a service to somebody, there is a chance that they've had some sort of experience with that service before, right? If we're cutting someone's hair, right, and got too close to the ear and someone like had a response, right? Like leaning into that. I noticed that this is a sensitive area for you. I'll try to, move around it in the most tender way possible. in the medical room, right? I understand that all of this history taking is getting really overwhelming for you. And I'm wondering if you would be open to just taking a moment. We can just slow down for a sec. Also, ditching the need to be a good whatever. Well, a good therapist would do this. A good doctor would do this. A good acupuncturist would do this. A good yoga instructor would do this. Ditching not only the need to be good, but the idea that there even is a good in that way. Ditching the need to be the expert in the room. With that reciprocity, we see the shared space between two individuals as a shared learning experience as well. There's space for the practitioner to be vulnerable. I've never heard of that before. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Or I haven't seen someone react in that way. Would you tell me a little bit more about what that was like for you? Addressing and alleviating the power dynamic, especially if it's somebody's first time doing something, or maybe they had a really traumatic or negative experience in the past. Addressing and alleviating that power over that can happen. I usually, I know I'm the one with the degrees and all of the things, but you are the expert on your experience. And we're going to tag team this together. This isn't just going to be me therapizing you. Think about even in more like physically intimate spaces, right? Massage, acupuncture, Reiki, energy healing. Really normalizing. We're two humans sharing energy and sharing space. And you get to be in charge of your body. Please tell me if that's too hard or too rough or too overwhelming. You don't have to sit in anything that makes you that uncomfortable. I mean, in therapy, we want a little bit of discomfort, right, to be able to push through. Sometimes uncomfortable, right, is because it's something I haven't done before, not because it's actually something that's bad or harmful to me. But figuring out ways to address and acknowledge and then alleviate that power dynamic. Incorporating our own other ways of knowing. I've become more confident with saying, I have this felt sense to share something with you. Would you be open to that? And I share, and sometimes it lands, and sometimes it doesn't land, but 3 sessions later, right, it comes back and it lands at a different time in a different context. So also knowing that we have knowledge and wisdom in our bodies, in our embodied experiences, in our life experiences that aren't necessarily just in what we learned in school or in this program or that program or in a training or something like that. And finding ways to connect again through shared experience. That one might be on all 3 of the sections, because I just really want to emphasize that connecting through shared experience can be really magical. Okay. We're getting into the 3rd section here. So we're going to take a break. See, 10:57, maybe coming back 11:07. If we're all back a little bit earlier than that, we can start a little bit earlier than that as well. But yeah, some movement, get out of your seat, Probably do some jumping jacks or some weird body dance over here to kind of get things flowing. Yes, V, just like that. Oh my gosh, how cool would it be? Because you guys are all on top of my screen, but if you were all doing that and then it was like one interconnected worm, oh, my heart. Oh, yes. Doesn't have to be so serious all the time. We can have fun, right? Okay, we'll take some time, use the restroom. We'll see you back at 11:07 for our last portion. All right. 11:07. Wouldn't be a true Capricorn if I wasn't on it about time. All right. Thanks for letting us know you're here. I'm back. All right. So I'm going to share screen again. We'll go into kind of this last section around ritual. Can you? um, it's not all good. I mean, we have our, you know, we have our stuff, believe me. um, so we'll go into ritual and ceremony. We'll do a little bit of just kind of things to consider, things to take into consideration if we're wanting to implement, this into our practice. We'll do some questions and then kind of like an exiting, grounding, and then we'll be on with our Friday. All right. Here we go. So creating ritual and ceremony in clinical spaces. I've come to believe that all and any healing work is ceremony. There is honoring, there is invoking, it is collaborative, it is connecting, and there is celebration. We're honoring the past, present, future, the two beings that are sharing space. We're invoking dialogue, creativity, different ways of thinking and seeing things. It's collaborative, connecting with each other. And there's a lot of celebration. We're celebrating wins. We're celebrating shifts that who I was before and who I am now. Not better, just different. And let's celebrate that. All right. So rituals and ceremonies have been part of human healing practices since the beginning of time. However, these practices are often excluded from clinical spaces due to Western therapeutic values of urgency and efficiency, right? Let's get the most done in the shortest amount of time and then move on to the next client. Intellectualization, right? Well, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if you really think about it, if you just feel something in your body, or if you're doing this ritual because it's something that has been passed on for you, like intellectually, like that, the cards don't really match there. Pathologizing, right? Some maybe ritual or ceremony for some people based on their communities or their spirituality practice, we might pathologize that, right? Talking to people, hearing voices, right? Those types of things that we do pathologize. That maybe it wouldn't be professional to start with a self-love ritual and create our self-love altar before every session for each client. Somehow that wouldn't be professional according to Western therapeutic values. It's not scientific. It's not evidence-based. It's not the same. It can't be cookie cutter, reimagined each time so that we can get a good amount of data on whether or not, right, it's really that helpful. I mean, I think we would challenge that it is very evidence-based, especially based on some of those ways of knowing that we talked about earlier. And then the Western therapy values of being very secular dominant. I mean, country being very secular dominant, right? As far as, you know, what religions or religious practices or spiritual practices are the norm, and then anything that's not that is othered in that way. So these are some reasons why rituals and ceremonies maybe aren't encouraged, or in some training programs, right? Or doctorate programs or marriage family therapist programs, right? There aren't classes on how to build ritual and ceremony in your practice. Some programs, probably a CIIS program. Hard truth. Our Western medical model is not the end all be all, and in fact is very infant in the history of healing modalities. This model is rooted in colonialism, Eurocentrism, and the Enlightenment area of the separation of body, mind, and spirit. Now, holistic is a word that gets thrown around a lot in therapy spaces and wellness spaces, right? We take a holistic approach. This is holistic therapy. We're seeing you as, as the whole person, type thing. But I feel like even in the West, even in that holistic aspect, there's still maybe a connection of mind body, but it's the spirit part that's still missing. Now, I love a good interconnected between mind and body, right? I mean, in so much of our day to day, in order to survive in these oppressive systems, limiting systems that we're trying to survive in, we have to split our head and our body, right? If our body's telling us to slow down, we can't listen to it in grind culture. We have to say, nope, I think that I can do this and I'm going to keep going. And we're just going to keep going until, until the wheels fall off, which we know they eventually do, or we get sick or, right. I mean, our body will take a break when it needs it if we don't give it one, if we're not listening to it more regularly. But the spirit part is missing. And again, the language around that, right? Spirit, divine, God, goddess, universe, whatever that might be for our clients. So how can we show up to combat this Western medical model? Has a lot to do with how we show up with the client's experience. So the first one being connecting with the client's experience, not what we think that the client should have experienced based on examples that we've had of that in a textbook, or how this other client of ours, experienced a situation like that. Being really present with this client's experience as much as we can. I mean, we're human. And connecting with that experience as being their truth. Having compassion towards our clients' experiences. And expressing that compassion. Wow, that sounds really heavy. Gosh, it sounds like you've been carrying a lot. Oh man, I wonder how relieving it would be to put even a little bit of that down. Gosh, feels like you're carrying a backpack and a fanny pack and a crossbody and, two rolly suitcases with all with all of this stress. Having compassion. I also want to emphasize here that each individual's limits are different, right? So you have a client that comes in and, they're able to maybe hold a lot more for whatever reason. Really kind of double down on, some of those coping skills to be able to get them back out there. Right. And then you have someone who, maybe isn't in an able body, or, maybe, gets sick often, or gets fatigued often, or, there's not that same level of capacity. So being able to be compassionate towards our client's experience and connecting with each one of theirs, not how should they be reacting, but how are they reacting based on all of the intersectionalities and the positionalities that they have when they show up in their life on a day-to-day, right? A cis white hetero male is going to have different experiences moving through the world, right, than a a Black queer female identifying client. And you're going to have different experiences, and so needing to connect and have compassion towards your client's specific experience and curiosity about it, not assuming that we know, right? Oh, I know how this goes, or I know how this plays out, or I've had plenty of clients who have had experiences like this, so this must be what your experience is. Now, the caveat to that is that there can be spaces where, oh, I have a lot of clients struggling with this right now. I wonder what's in the water. I wonder what's capitalism, grind culture's in the water. No, but so there's an aspect of that, right, that could be helpful in that connection, in that shared experience, right? If we say, oh, I just had so many clients this week that are really struggling with this same frustration of having to keep all the balls in the air all the time. Right, there's an aspect of that that could also be comforting, right? Based on your rapport with your client, or, based on, again, your intuitive thoughts around what they might need in that moment. And then letting the client be the expert on their experience. Okay. Creating ritual for your client, letting people arrive and letting people leave. I don't have the scientific research behind this, but I'm sure there is, as far as managing expectations and what happens when we have a ritual and the body becomes familiar with, after this ritual, X, Y, and Z happens. Or after this, so there's an expectation that the body can build safety around. So, for example, we talk a lot about like sleep routines with clients. If they're having a difficult time sleeping, okay, we got to find a routine. Usually it's me. I say pick three things because of my obsession with threes. But do the same three things, right? You brush your teeth, or you have your cup of tea, you read, you brush your teeth. If we can do that consistently for a certain amount of time, the body will start getting ready and preparing for sleep because it realizes the things that we're doing to be able to get ready. It knows what to expect next. Oh, we're having the tea. Oh, we're having the book. Oh, now we're brushing our teeth. We know what comes after that, getting into bed. So letting people arrive, having a slow start that lets clients arrive in the space, having a formal beginning to the session that the client can help co-create. This can be a grounding, intention setting, maybe doing a body scan, some sort of prayer, something that means we've arrived into this sacred space and we get to share this time together until we do a formal ending session. Now, there's aspects in the therapy world or the clinical world where, right, kind of that letting people, it could even be like a phrase that you say, right? Like, okay, where did you want to start today? Right. And that if we say that regularly, right, that kind of activates that, oh, we're in this space and this is what I can expect from being in that space. But being able to maybe do some grounding, what feels nice, asking our clients, how would you feel about creating some sort of ritual every time that you come in? Something that we can do that just kind of helps the body and the spirit and the mind know we're here in therapy, or we're here in, right? I think of like when I get massages, right? They do the inhale of, right, like the essential oil, like on their hands, and I'm inhaling it right through that little thing. And it's like, whatever it is, lemon or orange or mandarin, right? And if my practitioner does it consistently, then my body is going to be like, oh, this means we can let go. This means we can relax for the next little bit because we know what's going to come. And then letting people leave. allowing time to end a session. This can be a little difficult logistically, because again, we want to maximize the amount that we're able to work on or fix or get done or, address in the session. But having somewhat of a formal ending, or, it's a prompting, right? Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. I'm wondering if we could start to kind of reel in, kind of settle back into the space, prepare ourselves to go. Is there an intention that you want to take with you based on today's session? Maybe we should ground, maybe do a counteractive body scan, right up, a body scan in the beginning, a body scan in the end, noticing any movements of energy or tension in the body, right? Not necessarily always um, something that feels bad or harmful or tight, but, something that feels maybe is neutral now, or that's actually a pleasant feeling now, or that's dissolved, being able to kind of have that before and after. So creating ritual around letting people arrive and letting people leave. Creating a ritual for you as the practitioner, letting yourself arrive, letting yourself leave, having a formal kind of pre-session ritual that helps you be intentional about sharing sacred space with this specific client. Letting yourself leave, having a formal kind of post-session ritual that helps you end the sacred space with this client specifically, leaving the previous energy exchanged. I have developed this ritual of kind of each of my clients having a shoebox on the shelves of my brain. It has their name on it. And when it's their turn, take down the shoebox. We open it up. It could be limitless. It could keep going and going. We open it up. We spread it all around. It's on the walls. All of the content is all over the place. And then when that session's over, I gather up all of the things, all of the energy, all of the content, all of the transformation, put it back into that box and put it back on that shelf in my brain. So that visual helps me. It helps me to try to not carry over energy from one session to the next, but also to be really present in the session that I'm in. Okay, practical examples of how maybe having more of that Western mindset towards ritual and ceremony can be harmful for our clients. So, a therapist may refuse to discuss a client's connection to ancestors, spiritual guides, or dreams because they believe that therapy should remain religiously neutral. That has impact, right? Clients who see spirituality as central to the healing may feel disconnected from therapy and hesitant to really share their full experiences. Alternative seems seems pretty straightforward, but you'd be surprised. Clinicians can ask about spirituality in an open, non-judgmental way, allowing clients to incorporate spiritual practices into their healing journey. Again, when we're coming from a perspective of this therapy session or this Reiki session or this acupuncture session, the client owns it, right? I don't own it. I get to share it. I get to show up in the same space as them. But if they want to bring in these other tools that are helpful for them, and some of them are spirituality stuff or wanting to talk about spiritual guides or dreams, this is their space and their time. So being open about that, and also taking, a pretty in-depth, like, spiritual history. What is your relationship with spirituality? What did that look like growing up? Was there a religion that you were raised on? What was the transition like for that for you? What do you feel like that there's a higher power, or, in your intake, right? When we're going through medical history, family mental health history, sexual history, all of these, spiritual history, right? It's an aspect that our Western model is missing. but can be so powerful and transformational. For the client to not feel like they have to section out a certain part of their life from what's allowed to be in the therapy space. Okay. So rituals such as, not sure what a sprayer is, but prayer. The Capricorn in me is like, error. Okay. Or calling in ancestors may be dismissed as placebo effects or cognitive distortions rather than respected as powerful healing mechanisms. Right? If I'm very Westernly trained and very rigid, and this behavior is this cognitive distortion, and this is the way that we change it or fix it, then I'm going to approach a client very differently than, yeah, bring in what you need. No, I get that that makes sense for you. I get that this has been really helpful in your healing experience. Let's continue to use that. Let's implement that into the work that we do. I might have to ask you some questions around it or make sure I'm doing okay or using it in the right way. But yeah, let's do it. Let's try it. If you're open to being patient with me as I learn more about, the meaning and value that this has for you. Clients who rely on faith, energy, healing, or ceremony don't feel supported in clinical spaces as their healing modalities are not recognized as real medicine. Alternative practitioners can use a both and approach, acknowledging that science and spirituality are not mutually exclusive, but rather complementary forms of knowledge and complementary ways of knowing. Really shifting out of the rigid this or that to the both and approach. I mean, in our clinical therapy spaces or medical model spaces, I mean, really in life in general, the both and. Okay. So, some spiritual things that you might already be doing when you're sharing time with your clients. Maybe you do some pauses to check in with the body. Maybe you do a body scan the beginning of session. Maybe you do some sort of like intentional kind of going in. Maybe you encourage self-touch or self-soothing, right? Right here. Wonder what would it be like to just kind of hold your own hand right now. What would that feel like? I think parts work can be a very spiritual experience and something that may have been pathologized in the past, right? This idea that we have all of these different parts that are wanting to protect us, right? Our anxious part, our perfectionist part, and having conversations with those parts. Being in conversation with the perfectionist part, I see that it's really important for you to do everything right. What does that provide for you? What's that sense, a sense of safety, a sense of, predictability. So parts work can be a really spiritual experience it's not internal family systems. The model does not promote it as being a spiritual experience. But I think it is. Systems work, right? Anytime we're bringing in, there's nothing wrong with you, there's a shit ton wrong with the systems that you're trying to operate in, right? When we're calling out and naming those systems of oppression that are making it really difficult for our clients to find relief. We do any type of movement work, right? If we do any type of swaying, if we do any type of wiggling, if we do any type of, anything like this, jumping, we do maybe like walk and talk therapy. Anything movement is very spiritual, right? Because we're in touch with our bodies. Dream work, dream analyzing, inviting dreams as valid ways of gathering information. Really addressing spiritual influence in your intake. Anytime we do any resourcing, so anytime it's, Close your eyes, go to a place that helps you to feel really peaceful, or close your eyes. I want you to call in, right, the strength of your grandmother. Anytime we're doing any type of resourcing where we're acknowledging that there's some shift that needs some tending to, and we're calling in something. And that can even come from within, right? I want you to send your energy to that part of your stomach that feels really tight. And I want you to imagine kind of loosening up the fibers there with each breath. Imagery work, a safe space, a peaceful space. Describe it to me. Close your eyes and let me be there with you. Describe it. I want you to get a felt sense for what that feels like. Anytime we're doing any mindfulness stuff, anytime we're doing any grounding or rooting work, anytime we're doing any intention setting. These are all ways that you might already be incorporating spirituality into some of your practices. Okay. So some practical considerations. Oh, Dr. May, it sounds so great. Sounds so beautiful. Sounds so magical, but it's just not practical for the space that I'm practicing in. And that very well might be the case. Incorporating spirituality is going to be hard to do in the systems that we're operating in. Right? Our systems are hierarchical, they're oppressive, they're rigid, they're telling us that there's a right and a wrong way to do things. I'm pretty sure spirituality would fall into the wrong way to do it in clinical practice. And then we have the medical model influence, right? All of those values from the Western medical model. Those could be restraints. Those could be, hurdles for us. Time constraints is a big one. I mean, I think about like in the psychiatry field, right? Or like in the medication management field or with a primary care, right? They're got these 15-minute increments, right? Based on the place that they're working, back to back. And they got to gather information to put in the note to make sure that they send off to the insurance company to get the right type of reimbursement. I mean, it would be a disruption in a really beautiful way to maybe take a little bit more time or to maybe use that time differently to create a spiritual practice, even if we have a more constrained time, even just from the way that the practitioner shows up themselves in some of those ways that we talked about, being able to be an intuitive being in the room. Maybe it doesn't even have to really like look differently from the outside. In session versus what the chart says. I'm not telling you to lie in your charts or in your written record of time with clients, but what we do in session, I'm pretty sure we can figure out a Western model way of putting that into our chart, right? So if we did some grounding, or if we did a lot around kind of like dream work, right? Or something like that. Maybe we wouldn't put, we spent 53 minutes analyzing a dream. I guess a psychodynamic approach that would make sense. Maybe it looks like, right? We explored clients' dreams and found spaces to make meaning, utilized mindfulness skills to, implement, knowledge into the day-to-day, used, act to identify values within the dream that are aligned with behavior, right? I mean, we can figure out a way to make it make sense on paper. And then also supervision or consultation differences, right? Or like higher ups, having I mean, I can only imagine, right, being not quite licensed, or you're still getting your hours, or you're in training, right, and going to your supervisor and being like, I would like to implement spiritual practices into my therapy, right? And then I could just see their head spin. Um, as far as, well, no, I mean, we need the evidence based. These are the modalities that we use. This is the structure. This is the, this is the script that you read from. What do you mean you want to incorporate this in? So again, I'm not saying go behind people's backs, but challenge a bit. Okay, I will use the protocol for, EMDR, and maybe one of the resources that we implement in the EMDR protocol, maybe one of those resources is an ancestor, right? Or is a spiritual healer or something like that. So there's ways that we can weave, spiritual considerations into clinical practice, even if we don't have a space that's very welcoming of that. Ethical considerations. Consent, consent, consent. We are not doing or implementing or suggesting or trying anything without the client's consent. Client autonomy to be able to say, no, this isn't working for me, or this is what works for me. Can you get on board so we can start utilizing this and implementing it into the practice? But always client's autonomy and always consent. Now, if you've done a spiritual as part of your intake, if you've done kind of more of like a spiritual history or spiritual influence in your intake, it wouldn't be as maybe jarring, right, for the client to bring in spirituality, because no, we already established that we are doing a full, real holistic, right, kind of intake process, and this is going to be a part. If it's something that you connect with, this is going to be a part of the work that we do. Our own personal spiritual bias, wanting to make sure that we know that we are going into the session with a bias, right? I mean, the biggest kind of bullshit of the blank slate kind of narrative that we get in therapy school, in our master's programs or our doctor's programs, right? Is this like blank slate? Like you have no thoughts, feelings, emotions. You're a completely blank slate for each client that you interact with. And it's just not practical. We're bringing in bias on a moment to moment basis. And if the expectation is to be a blank slate, what's really happening is that we're not addressing the bias that's already in the room anyway. And so having more of an awareness around our spiritual biases, experiences that maybe we've had with someone's religion before, right? Someone could come in and Catholicism and the Virgin Mary and, these different saints are very important and very meaningful and valuable for them. And maybe we had a really harmful experience in the Catholic Church. How are we going to make that work? Cultural humility and appropriation. Making sure that we're not implementing things that come from a source without the permission to implement them. Now, some things have been a bit more generalized, right? I mean, we can kind of take, like, let's say, like a tapping technique, right? Like back to Chinese medicine, but it's become something that's been more commonly used in therapy spaces. So just kind of having that cultural humility as far as the man that created internal family systems that works on parts work, he didn't create that, right? That came from somewhere else and is an accumulation of probably some cultural traditions and rituals, right, that were going on for centuries before, he showed up and decided to put it in this package and give it this name. Not assuming that we know what the client's talking about when they talk about their specific cultural spiritual practice, asking questions, getting curious, being sensitive to clients with religious trauma, right? Even in the initial intake, what's your relationship with your spirituality? is there that intersection between their spirituality and trauma, and being sensitive to that, and seeing if the client's open to creating a new narrative, right? Or a relationship between spirituality with spirituality. And they might not be. And they might not be initially, and then kind of get there as they continue to feel safe. So being sensitive that anytime we're using any type of spiritual or religious kind of practice, that some of our clients or some of the people that we come in contact with are going to have religious trauma. Pathologizing a client's experience. So what I talked about earlier, around making sure that we're not giving a clinical pathology to someone's really meaningful spiritual experience. Okay. So this will be a reflection that we don't necessarily spend time for with ourselves right now, just looking at time and wanting there to be space for any questions or any reflection. But maybe just write this down for yourself. How can you begin to reimagine your clinical space as a sacred space where healing is relational, intuitive, and even, dare I say it, spiritual? I'll give you guys a moment to write that down if that feels like something you want to reflect on. Okay. I will stop sharing screen to just kind of go into questions and then close our space together closer to noon Pacific Standard Time, making sure we kind of have that beginning and then that end. And then this is being recorded, so there will be options for you to kind of go back through things. I do have just kind of like some places to start, kind of reference page here. Not all spiritually based, but a nice combination of systems work, of liberation work, of pleasure work, of decolonizing work. Yeah, so that'll be when you get the recording, or being able to just kind of pause on this part and jot down some of those resources if you'd like. Hmm. All right. Maybe a collective deep breath at this quarter till. Hmm. Big inhale. Exhale. Be another inhale and maybe an audible exhale. I'll mute myself so you don't hear my audible, but just kind of get any of that stale energy. Mm. All right. We are a more kind of intimate group. So if you guys have any questions, anything clarifying, anything that you wrote down and I went too fast, try to maintain a slow pace in the spirit of spirituality.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, is it Nada?
Nada.
Nada. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mae. This was so wonderful, so very informative, and an absolute resource for, I'm sure, all of us. And for me particularly, I'm just starting to build my own practice. So this feels very foundational moving forward. My question, if it's not too personal, I fully understand if it's out of bounds, but I was wondering what your own clinical practice looks like. Are you practicing individually? You did mention that you are open to supervising. Just like what, I don't want to say institution, but like what kind of infrastructure do you work under using clinical and integrating clinical and spiritual practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that it speaks to, right, some of those considerations that we were talking about. So if I worked in community mental health, it might not be as accessible, right, for me to be able to utilize some of this. But I have been in private practice since 2018. I now, since end of 2020, have a group practice. So I have clinicians that work with and for and underneath my license, and have a team of clinicians that that work. I don't like saying work for me, work with me now, and a lot of those being associates or pre-licensed folks that are wanting to get some of their hours and experience in private practice. So yeah, I've been kind of getting to make my own rules in that way. So there's a lot more flexibility to be able to incorporate some of this stuff. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
I was curious. Thank you so much, Mae. I love this. This is wonderful. I learned a lot. I was curious for the folks who are in the room with us who, how many are clinicians? Um, and I'm going to remove your spotlight. And I'm just curious, like raising hands, are you all clinicians? Are many of you clinicians? I'm just curious.
Mhm.
Yeah, we heard them. Thank you.
Mm.
And I see, yeah. Thanks for using the chat too.
Mm.
Thanks, Eileen. Yeah, cool. Yeah, getting there. Mm. Are there any other questions for Mae? We could put them in the chat, or you could just unmute.
I have a question. My name is Taryn, and I think I saw this ad on LinkedIn. Just,
Yeah, yeah, we
you
were
know,
yeah.
yeah, it was just total synchronistic, right?
Yeah.
And I love it. And then, so what are the second, because I hear it's a series. So can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And so yeah, it sounds like you're not part of CIS. You saw this sort of by happenstance. You're from it.
Yeah, I'm actually in the psychedelic assisted therapy program, completely
Wonderful.
different, but that's
Yes,
as
very.
far as my affiliation is.
Yeah. So just to give you sort of starting from the broader point, we're an academic program. I think I said this at the top, but we offer PhDs and masters in the field of women's spirituality, which is a transdisciplinary field that covers religious studies, theology, anthropology, ecofeminism, a lot of these, in there. And traditionally our work in that field has been very academic in nature, but we have a really big number of students and potential students who are quite interested in starting careers. So some of our students are like Dr. Mae, clinicians, and they have come to our master's program, sometimes the PhD program, to sort of build out the offerings that they have. And we have clinicians from a variety of different backgrounds, sometimes somatic, sometimes others. And so that, and then we also have a number of people who are starting spiritual entrepreneurship businesses in various ways and using their degrees to do that work. And so this series is something that we're experimenting with, really, because we are wanting to build out some curriculum that more directly serves our students who, and this is obviously open, for more than just our students, but our goal is to build this out to support our students. And so today's workshop with Dr. Mae was focused on our folks who are clinicians who are building out that side of a business practice or their professional practices. And then the next two, which V very kindly put a link there in the chat, they're going to be a little bit different. They're on building a business for spiritual entrepreneurs. So they're not direct. I mean, I think a lot of what we might learn in there may be useful for clinicians, but it's not directly serving clinicians or direct, the audience is not specifically geared towards clinicians. It's geared more broadly towards these two workshops have been there. We have a number of speakers in each of them. So one is, I think, 1 week from today, and the other one is mid-March. Thank you, V. V is putting in information, populating as we go. And they're really looking at both. Some of it is it's a student of ours who has has background in the business world, spiritual entrepreneurship, and is essentially building out, offering some tangible skills for, like, how do you start a business? What does entrepreneurship look like? How do you do these things that we don't typically offer in an academic setting, but that are really quite useful, or our students are interested in. And it's a mix. The first one, which is called Workshop 2, so the first of these next two, will be building a solid foundation. And some of that work is going to be looking at some of the blocks, sometimes psychological blocks that get in the way, especially we are a women's spirituality program. We serve people where our students are not all women, but we focus on patriarchy and responding to it and studying in that way, feminist pedagogy. So therefore so I'm talking too much, but I'm excited about these. So the first one is some of the blockages that can happen for people who are not just women, but, oppressed in various ways that can get in the way of a successful, business career or money, that kind of stuff. And then some is more the kind of how-to tools. And there are a number of speakers in there that are mostly coming from this wonderful student organizer, student who is organizing Jessica Lamar's sort of network, because she is in this world. So these are our first 3 workshops, and then all of this is building towards more curricular development in our program that will be coming in later next year, etc. So hope that answers your question, Taryn. Yeah, and you're welcome to all of them, please, and spread the word. They're going to be open to the public. And while I'm talking at you, I will share one thing I'd like to share is that we are looking for feedback. So this is like new for us. We're an academic program. It's really new for us to be offering stuff that is more sort of skills-based, business-based. And so we have a feedback that we're hoping to ask you all for. It'll come in an email also, but I'll also just put it into the chat here. And we would love, love, love your feedback. We'd love to hear what kinds of things you would like to learn, what kinds of things, are useful for folks. And then also Dr. Mae, I think, is available for speaking and doing other things and is an incredible person. So I see Dr. Mae put her email in there, and yeah, please do get in touch with her. And if you want to say anything, Mae, please do. But thank you for filling out this form, all of you who are in the room with us. Appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, I just put in the chat too for, things, the second two workshops, just things that were not taught in our master's program or PhD program, right around starting a private practice or the business aspect of things. It's something that, it's like, oh, you'll get this freedom when you get private practice, but we're not going to give you any any resources around, right, like how to start a business or what that looks like, or how to work on your relationship with money, or how much to charge, or right, all of these things that come out as we're starting to build a private practice in that way. So, um, yeah, I put my email in there. If you guys could fill out the form and just be helpful for us to gather a little bit more information and be able to manage expectations moving forward, to be able to offer more things like this. And then if you're okay, I know we have 3 minutes, but just in the spirit of practicing what I preach, to be able to close our time together. So if you guys want to maybe just kind of soften a little bit. Soften, feel the support of wherever you're sitting, under your seat, just kind of reacclimating with our body. Reacclimating with that green, warm light. Our body is different than it was when we first started. So again, to close our time together, I invite you to go inward. Maybe closing your eyes gently again. Just noticing the breath going in and out. Holding on to that soft green emerald light we imagined before. Imagine yourself sitting in a beautiful, safe, healing space. Whether that's a therapy room, a sacred search bowl, a place in nature, under a big tree. Just kind of noticing that this space is ancient and expansive and filled with so much wisdom. What do you see there in your sacred space? Perhaps there are candles, sacred objects, symbols, things that have meaning and value to you. Perhaps you sense the presence of healers who have worked with spirit for centuries. Maybe you hear some soft drumming, rustling of leaves, birds chirping, sound of waves. This is our clinical space reimagined, a place where science and spirituality dance together, interwoven in a beautiful song of both and. A place where intuition, ceremony, and collective healing are honored. Breathing in this possibility. And knowing you can take it with you wherever you go. I appreciate all of your willingness to spend a couple hours with us this morning. Definitely felt all of your energy, and it's definitely reciprocated the learning and the energy exchange. So thank you all so much.
I'll just close us by saying thank you, Dr. Mae. You're incredible. So grateful for this. So grateful to you and all the learning. And also thank you to V, our incredible program coordinator, who is so much better at me than links. I put the wrong link in there, so I have now corrected it. Sorry about that. She's also better than me at a lot of other things. But thank you to V, and thank you so much, Mae, and thank you to all of you in this room, and we really appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.